Side 2 begins with Nick of Time, and boy does it have quite the intro to get us back up and going again, with that build up of the hi-hat, the bass, and the guitars. Then barely half a minute before it kicks off proper into a good old rocking and rolling riff and drum beat. In the first verse, Brian Johnson sings about being on the wrong track, the wrong line, and the first train to run online. I guess he went on the wrong bus and had himself found in Royston. Mad Bull seeing red, coming at me, happy when I'm dead, jump and fence and get away. In the chorus, everybody's trying to find you guilty and make you toe the line, which sounds like modern Twitter the more I think about it. But then he was saved by the nick of time. In the nick of time. I guess you could say he was saved by the bell? Nobody wants to remember that? Okay. In the second verse, there's a slow plane, hard rain, cold sweat, and Brian feels the strain. Though I wouldn't worry about that too much. I get similar feelings if ever there's a turbulence. And of course, Angus Young offers a sweet licking guitar solo to grace us all with musical glory. And it actually goes on for quite a while, in fact, even taking a bit of break when we think it might end soon, but instead it continues on. Not that I mind much at all. Longer solos just mean I get to enjoy them more. Following such is the third verse, as Brian sings to us to lose sleep, get grief someday, and get no relief. Which is how I imagine some YouTubers like myself may feel, having to make and do videos very late at night. Lynch mob on your tail, thinking they were searching for the Holy Grail. But it turns out they were searching for the life of Brian, or the meaning of life, or a crystal skull, or some Dial of Destiny thing. Nick of Time is definitely among AC/DC's more underrated and overshadowed tracks in my opinion, and possibly other people's opinions as well. Next is Some Sin for Nothing, with nothing spelt with a U instead of an O and an apostrophe instead of a G, because poor literacy is cool, even with AC/DC. Still though, this is another underrated song by them anyways, in my opinion, as Brian sings about how heroes are hard to find and that they don't make the news till they do time. Especially in the case of the Marvel Universe, where most of their events are basically the superheroes themselves fighting each other instead of the supervillains. Schemers turn the screw, they get the word, and they drop on you. They're planning the most nefarious dogpile ever imaginable. Then in the chorus itself, Brian brings up many reasons why people would commit crimes and other bad actions, or sins as he puts it. Singing that some sin for gold or cash, gain, wine or pain, but he ain't gonna be the fool who's gonna sin for nothing. And that's pretty much the core theme of this track. That if you're gonna go and do things that may be considered bad, immoral, or unethical, you better do so for a natural motivation and a reason and get something out of it, whether it's for benefit, enjoyment, or some greater good. In the second verse, Brian mentions Roman Emperor Nero, calling him an evil mind and saying that Nero was born before his time. Clearly, he should have been born in the 18th century. Totally makes sense. You got to lay down the rule and push up the price. I mean, in this apparent recession, that's pretty given. Turn on the heat and put you on ice. That boiler radiator should help you from drowning should you fall through the melting cracked ice beneath you. Some sin for nothing, but I would definitely sin if it meant be as good on guitar as Angus Young is. Then we have Rough Stuff, another straightforward song with a straightforward theme. Brian kicks us off right away, saying that he likes them big, he likes them small, and if he had to take an oath, he would take them all. He likes them big, he likes them chunky. They like his sound, they think he's funky. He says to give him that rough stuff, and it's what he wants. At first, one might think he's singing about drugs in particular, but as we'll see here later on, it's more about something else almost as taboo. Brian goes on to talk about a particular girl of interest, describing her as a saint, a sinner, a rave, a woman, and a winner in every way. A saint and a sinner, huh? Is she also a priest and a thief? She don't want love or cabarets, that's out. She likes to play around, and that suits me fine. I like it better when she reads my mind. Obviously meaning that she's not so much interested in any legit romance or relationship and the like, just in the sex itself. And Brian himself doesn't seem to mind this much. So basically, this is about friends with benefits. And that's probably the most polite term I can find to describe this. Don't want a woman with a ball and chain, don't want to play that game. Okay, so Brian likes rough stuff, but he apparently draws a line at kinky stuff like that? Okay. And yeah, I know ball and chain are often used to refer to something like a restraint or a limiting restriction, or in this case, a romantic partner, but given the somewhat sexual nature, a small twisted part of my mind kind of jumped onto that. And don't you try to convince me you didn't think similarly either. As for the music, we still get some good guitar riffing from the brothers Young, Angus, and Malcolm, and I may say they do capture the roughness of the subject matter, if you pardon my pun. Again. Rough stuff is close enough to being rough, but it's definitely far from being stuffy. Like my nose. After that, we're up to Two's Up. At 5 minutes and 19 seconds, this is the longest track on the album, but it's still an underrated killer track nonetheless. And of course, the sexual undertone, or overtone, depending on who you might ask, continues off from the previous song, immediately with its title, as apparently Two's Up was an Old English term to refer to having a threesome. That, or an old expression from Yorkshire meaning to share a small piece of something, or another way of saying piece. Although in actual fact, Two Up, with a hyphen, does actually refer to a traditional game of gambling from Australia, which may be likely so since AC/DC do happen to be mostly Australian. Even considering how the lyrics in the song may go, I'll still leave that to interpretation and your conclusion. Anyway, the music here has a more emotional tone and feel, as if it might be somewhat serious this time round compared to the other more upbeat and carefree songs, at least as far upbeat as AC/DC go. As for the lyrics themselves, Brian's on his last stand, down to his last dime, and he ain't got the sense to leave. The dealer's cutting fine, the last straw, and back against the wall. Depending where the money is where I'm going to fall. These seem to definitely lean towards the idea of gambling, or at least using such to represent gambling one's own life, for instance, especially when he also mentions aces high and hide your poker eyes. You see, no one can read Brian Johnson's poker face. He's got to love nobody. In the chorus, one line he sings is, "Give me head, give me tails, give me doubled up and coming up doubled over on the rails," which further references the two-up game since, from what little I researched, it involves two coins being thrown up into the air and falling down as players would bet on whether they will land on the heads or tails. You know, that usual thing. And after over 5 minutes of all that, it goes out on quite a fake-out ending, as the guitars seem to ease their last chord and Brian's echoes the title one last time, but we then get some suspenseful faded-in guitar strumming as the cymbals tapping and Brian yelps out, ending the song proper. Honestly, with a high note like that, this could have been the last track to go out for this album. However, we do have one more song to look at. And that last song being This Means War. As Bugs Bunny would have you realize, of course. With Tunes Up feeling like a grand finale of sorts in and of itself, this suddenly feels like an epilogue to the overall album. It also has a pretty fast-paced rhythm and beat going with it, almost on par with something out of Iron Maiden or Judas Priest or even Saxon. Brian commands the song as always, wanting you to march. Then he spouts out other short phrases and orders like eyes go right, shoulder arms, left wheel turn, show your charms. With later lines such as when the flags are high, hear the battle cry, treaty gone, see the bandits fly, dig the trench, watch that blast, shell shock coming fast. This definitely does seem to paint a picture of warfare, not like Iron Maiden's The Trooper. In the bridges leading to the choruses, Brian states, name and rank on parade might get laid by a hand grenade. What's worse is that it would just be a one-night stand and that grenade is going to sleep with someone else the next day. And you know what that means? That means war. War on that grenade for lying, cheating on you, and breaking your heart. And you deserve justice, my man. And this goes out on one of those classic, those cymbal crashing conclusions that you usually hear out of most classic and rock and metal tracks. Yet we can never get tired or sick of them. They just feel like a natural way to end such raw musical power. And all that, this album blows, and in all the good ways possible. Compared to albums that have come before, like Back in Black or Highway to Hell, or ones that would come afterwards, like Black Ice or Power Up, Blow Up Your Video is in a way underrated. On its own, it's mostly what you expect from AC/DC, and some may argue that they might be playing it safe here, not really stretching their musical muscles or getting out of their blues-inspired hard rock and roll comfort zone. But as is, this album is still pretty fine regardless. It does well at being a send-off to the 80s before the 90s would roll in, with succeeding albums such as Razor's Edge, Ball Breaker, Stiff Upper Lip, Black Ice, etc. And it does have some good rocking highlights. Songs such as Nick of Time, Heat Seeker, Some Sin for Nothing, and That's the Way I Want to Rock and Roll all definitely come to mind at least. So if you're a fan of AC/DC, casual or hardcore, and you haven't heard this album before, or if you're a newcomer trying to get into AC/DC, check out this album, give it a listen, and see how it does for you. And to anyone who have listened to this before already, what are your thoughts on it? Do you think this is an underrated album in AC/DC's discography? And what might be your favourite AC/DC album? Let your thoughts be known in the comments down below. Next time, we'll be going from city to city with a Jerry or Gary Rafferty album. If not his most popular album featuring his most popular song. Hello again, Anorak. How's the new year going for you? Pretty fine so far, I guess. How about you? Well, to get to the point, I went through some old Monarch files the other day, and I discovered photos of what seemed to be an uncharted island in the North Sea. Something that, under some strange miracle, had defied discovery until now. According to these files, this island is apparently home to a particular kaiju, a titan, if you will, one simply referred to as Titanus Noah. Titanus Noah. Noah. Were they just running out names of mythological creatures to pick from a hat? Maybe so, but still, this could mean something, especially with this war against Gablo on the horizon. This could be the tide turner that we would need as an advantage. So what do you suggest we do then?
I think one of us could go on an expedition with a crew, travel to the North Sea, find that island and that creature, see if we could somehow reason with it.
And even if we could somehow manage to and afford an expedition like that, how would one be able to reason with a kaiju?
Well, these files I found also spoke of certain individual humans, each from and chosen by a particular tribe or some ancient civilization, to act as a priest or a prophet to these titans, to tame and communicate with the beasts. Mothra, of course, had the twins, and Kong may have had one from the Iwis. Plus, it's likely that other titans, like Typhon, Sekhmed, Behemoth, and even Rodan, may have had one of their own each.
And you think this Noah kaiju might still have a prophet of its own, even to this day?
Probably, but not entirely out of possibility. Whoever and wherever this prophet may be, if not on the island itself, they could be the divining rod that we would need to find that creature, to bring us to the Titan. And it's just most likely a matter of trying at least. I'll go see if anyone's up for hire, maybe even get a pelican to use instead of having to rely on a boat.
Wait. A pelican dropship? Would we be able to get one of those?
Hey, we made a ground bridge that somehow managed to work. Kind of, sort of, maybe. Anything goes.
You know, don't we always live in such strange times in this reviewerverse or what?